everybody, Karen Roby here for TechRepublic, talking today about cognitive neuroscience. And Jonathan Page is the president and co-founder of Cognitive Command Group. Happy to have you with me here today.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about this. We're going to talk specifically about how this technology is ultimately helping law enforcement officers across the country. So John, explain to us and our audience here about cognitive neuroscience, how the non-conscious part of the brain, now training that in a certain way will help.
Yeah, so the brain has two systems, what you're consciously aware of, and then the non-conscious part where almost everything happens. And that's where your drives and biases and urges and impulses all come up from what we call the back channel of the brain, the non-conscious part of the brain. So most of our actions and behaviors are initiated there, a lot of times without our awareness. And when we are thinking through something and thinking through answers or trying to problem solve, we can direct our conscious brain to kind of override some of those impulses and urges and really take control of what we're doing and what we're thinking and how we're behaving. But when we're under stress, our brain is built for the non-conscious brain to take over to help us with survival or to help us get out of a scrape, something like that. So with police officers, when they've been trained how to respond in certain ways to help people out, to de-escalate events, things like that, when stress starts to rise and get higher, then their non-conscious brain really starts to take over the processing. And that's where even really good officers can do things they later regret, is because the non-conscious brain and those urges and impulses to say something or do something happens, and they might regret that later. So what our training does is to focus on that non-conscious part of the brain. Most training is focused on the conscious part, where you tell people what they should do, what the rules are, be sure you consider these three things. But when the non-conscious brain takes over, it hasn't gone through that training. So our training is to train that non-conscious part of the brain so that officers can stay in control better. They're more likely to keep their conscious brain active and solving problems. And when urges and impulses do kind of bubble up, they're more appropriate to begin with.
And John, there's obviously few professions where the stress is higher than, for these officers. These guys and gals are out there and put in very dangerous situations oftentimes. And the amount of stress that they're under is so significant. So talk a little bit about how you parlayed your research into, how did you move into law enforcement and being the co-founder of this company? How did it all come together, I guess, with your background?
Yeah, that's a great question, because my background is not in law enforcement. So as a scientist, I was studying how the brain processes information, like memory, imagination, recall, and awareness, those types of things. And I wanted to see how it changed under stress. So I started doing some research with law enforcement officers, because in training, they put themselves under stress. And so I can follow them and see what happens. And I have a portable EEG that fits over the head for a skull cap that has about 40 electrodes attached. So I can measure how the brain is processing information in real time. And this portable unit, I was able to take it with me over to London, to the London Metropolitan Police in the UK, because they have a driver training program over there where they train driving at high speeds in and with the general public. So it's very stressful for their officers to do this type of training. And I was able to put the cap on officers while they're driving 120, 130 miles an hour in the public and measure what their brain was doing. And I saw how the brain kind of shifted its processing to take care of the things that it really needed to take care of. The non-conscious brain took over to make sure they were staying safe. And it showed things like tunnel vision and auditory exclusion, those types of things that happen to the brain when it's under stress. So taking that information to help officers, not just when driving, but in other types of stress, is kind of how we moved from the research into a company to give officers an advantage in stressful situations.
And it's not just, police officers, law enforcement here that you guys are reaching out to as well. You're also taking this work to, in the industrial realm as well.
Yes, we are. So what's interesting about this is it's really, our system is understanding how the brain works and then developing training to work with the brain. A lot of times training what we think we want to train, and we try to hammer things home, it's just kind of hammering into the brain and it's not really effective. So our methodology is about how to work with the brain, but it's content agnostic. It doesn't matter what the content is or what you want to train. It's a system to train the brain. So we've moved it into industrial safety, and we've seen really large changes in that area. We've moved it into construction as well. And every area we go into, we see really large changes in behavior, which is important. It's not just convincing somebody of something or changing their mind or their attitude towards something, but it's real behavioral change that we're seeing.
I think it's pretty fascinating to think, John, about how technology has enabled, training. I mean, in so many ways, we've seen how it's been improved, but it's really fascinating to see and to think about how you can impact outcomes, in a much more positive light by harnessing that technology and putting it out there.
Yeah, and it's really technology that allowed us to understand the brain as much as we already understand it. And there's still so much more to learn. But then to take that technology and use it in the way we're training on the non-conscious side of the brain, it would be extremely difficult to do without technology. And you have to train the non-conscious brain in a completely different way. It's a completely different approach than to training when you're consciously aware or listening to somebody train you in an area. And so ours is down to 1 to 5 minute exercises that you do at different times throughout the day repeatedly. And so technology allows us to create those kind of mental exercises and then schedule them in like a menu list throughout a day and throughout a person's work day or work shift to give them kind of the dosage that they need at the right times over a period of time to start rewiring the brain for safety.
All right, very good. John, I certainly appreciate you being with me here today. Again, Jonathan Page, president and co-founder of Cognitive Command Group. It's really fascinating work that you guys are doing.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Certainly. And we appreciate all of you being here with us today. For much more, make sure you check out TechRepublic. Thanks for watching.